Us. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your company. Thank you for trusting us with your time. I am Helga Saraiva Stewart, and this is Sales TV. I am your host today, bringing a lot of energy with my good pal, Alex Abbott. We're here to talk with you today about selling in a holiday destination. And guess what? Alex is just moved to Portugal. I have been here for about 8 years after 25 years in London. There are some very different contexts to Alex and I being here. So we're going to share some of those with you. And so today's conversation is really to those who are wondering what it's like to maybe have that dream life in the country that you wish you were waking up in and going to bed in, and of course, working there. We chose Portugal, right, Alex? Tell us about the context that brought you here.
I will. And by the way, I must say, I love your energy. I love the energy you bring to Sales TV. It's contagious. I'm stepping it up a gear today. So I guess to give you some context, let me go back a few years, because I was, I say, lucky enough to fall into B2B sales. I spent 7 years working my arse off trying to get into business sales, because I felt like that's where I really wanted to be. That's where the money was. If I look back on the 24 years I've now spent in business sales, I've been lucky enough to live in Australia and sell into the Asia Pacific region back in 2012. I was then lucky enough to live in Dubai in the UAE, and my team was selling across Eastern Europe, Middle East, and all of Africa. So they were some very interesting times. And in 2018, came back from Dubai to go back to the UK, and it was later on in 2020 I left the corporate world, and I've spent several years trying to solve one of business's biggest problems, which is the pipeline issue we all experience. And I think like any new business owner, had some ups and downs over the last few years. Thankfully, there's more ups than downs. And last year we decided to sell our house and downsize. My two eldest sons had moved out. We no longer needed a 4-bed house. So we thought, well, let's downsize. And after making that decision, what was interesting is my wife and I started talking about where we would want to live next. And initially we thought we were going to live somewhere else near family in the UK, but we asked ourselves the question, what about sunshine? Why don't we go get some sunshine? We're both 50, and that really sort of developed, that thought process developed, and we started looking into various countries within Europe. Italy, Spain, and Portugal was on the list. Thanks to David Cameron, it made the exercise somewhat more difficult than it could have been. That's the context. In the end, we chose Portugal, and we love it.
And there's an important characteristic here, because people might choose to only live in that country, but not necessarily sell into that country. So of course, we're talking about sales, beloved sales. And you chose to have your clients where?
Yeah, well, so I'm one of those people. So I live and work in Portugal, but none of my clients are based in Portugal. So really, this was a lifestyle choice for us. Very different to the two previous times. Moving to Australia was very much transferring within the company that I was in to do a job specifically for that company, and the same with Dubai. But this time we've chosen to live here for a lifestyle choice. And yeah, my clients are based in the UK, across Europe, the North America, hopefully soon to be Singapore. So yeah, I think the way the world has changed, I think my clients, my audience are far more receptive to being approached digitally, and me delivering my services to them digitally.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose just in contrast to that, when I moved 8 years ago, we wanted to raise our son in Portugal. I think that was the big factor, I suppose. We wanted kind of the lifestyle, but I also, in a way, craved that independence of just let's see what it's like to own your own business and have your own freedom, so to speak.
Yeah.
Of course, it comes to a price being an entrepreneur. I really do feel that not everybody is born to be an entrepreneur, and thank goodness for that. It's not for everyone,
No.
and there's so many good sides to it, but there's so much downside to it as well. I mean, I've been very fortunate to work for amazing tech companies, software companies, ethics and compliance technology companies, and who invest in their sales teams. So I feel that I have an incredible upbringing in sales, in ethics, in professionalism, in education, learning, keeping up with the trends, really trying to meet a level of excellence. I suppose not everybody can say that about their company, right?
No. Well, how long have you been? So you moved back to Portugal, did you, 8 years ago?
Indeed.
Is that when you set up your business?
Indeed.
Okay.
And so it was my very first time being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out if I am indeed one, because there are a lot of things that I miss about being employed by someone. It was. I'm also selling into the Portuguese market. I think throughout these 8 years, what has happened is that I don't think I've ever learned so much about sales as I have these past years, and being my own boss. Because the most strategic choice I believe any of us can do, whether we're self-employed or not, is who we spend time with. So that to me is the most strategic choice that you can make when you're selling. Who do you spend your time with? And so understanding my personas, my ideal clients, really understanding where it is that I can be different, be unique. I don't know if anyone here listening remembers Rajiv our session with Rajiv, but please have a listen, because he talks about not just being the best, being the only, and then connecting with them. I suppose there was a level of cultural engagement there. So there's a lot of different variables when we move into a different country, especially if we're selling into that country.
Yeah.
And culture really comes into play.
Yeah.
A little bit about how you dealt with culture in all the different locations you're in. And also, let's lead this conversation onto the prospecting side of things and how you prospected.
Yeah. If I go back to Australia, 2012, I was a sales rep, but I was at the sort of the peak of my career. For by that point, I'd been selling successfully for 6 years. So my confidence was at an all-time high. And I really did feel like, Lewis Hamilton at his peak, in the zone, like everything I touched turned to gold. Well, not everything, but, a lot of things that I touched turned to gold. And I do put that down to the approach that I took. So when I moved to the other side of the world with a brand new territory and no existing relationships, I relied solely on my ability to position differentiating commercial value and quantify that value to my clients. And I had a process that I followed that I could trust in that process. And that resulted in me closing 3 enterprise deals within the first 7 months from a standing start. So culturally, I think there's two things that I would bring into focus here, because it's important to know that I think at that time, 2010 to 2000, maybe 18, especially being in the tech world, there was this marketing engine that actually existed, this growth engine that actually existed and worked, and lead nurturing was working. Doesn't work anymore, I must add. So there was a combination of me leveraging the brand that we had in the region, but also then relying on my own approach. That's the first thing I would say. The second is, I moved to a region where it wasn't as mature as Western Europe and the US in terms of the number of stakeholders that were influencing a decision. Back then I was even seeing 6 to 8 stakeholders influencing a purchase decision. In Australia, I found it easier to get to the executive. There wasn't as many layers. There wasn't as many bureaucracy and politics. So when I did get to the decision maker, I was then having that commercial value conversation with the right person that could make a decision relatively quickly. So I think, those 3 things combined, that's what I put down to my success in Australia. And culturally, the Aussies love the Brits. Certainly my experience of them was. And so it was relatively easy to fit in. The Middle East, on the other hand, was a little bit different. We relied on relationships that were existing relationships and were quite deep relationships. And, we were sort of talking off air about how, decisions were often made around the shisha pipe as opposed to out to dinner. And, if you weren't in the circle, it was a lot more difficult to influence decision making.
Yeah. Sorry, please go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
Well, and then finally, I would say today, what are we now? 2024, partway through 2024. It's all digital for me. I don't have the luxury of going to meet my clients in person. And so leveraging social media in a way that is closest to an in-person networking experience is what I spend most of my days doing. Not all day, but several hours a day, focusing on thinking about how I can develop relationships with the people that I want to do business with without sending them a sales email.
Yeah.
I
suppose, it's a conversation in itself. You mentioning sales emails, this is quite close to my own heart. But one of the things that I've noticed, I suppose Portugal resembles a lot of other jurisdictions, a lot of other regions, which are conservative, right? More traditional and conservative. I think there's this interesting blend between, I find myself doing this blend between value selling and relationship selling. And value selling, I suppose, is so critical nowadays, because if you want to cut through the noise and attract someone's attention, regardless of where they are in the world, connecting with them really does demand of you the ability to put value in your words in how you introduce yourself, and doing it from a client-centric point of view, from an other-centric point of view. And there's a lot to be said about that, because now we're talking about the quality of the sales conversations, especially the very first thing you said.
Yeah.
Now, that aside, I was talking about countries being conservative, and I suppose networking really comes into play. So I find that, when I look at what's made me successful here in Portugal, kind of breaking into a market where it's very much built off of family companies. So, you look at the biggest companies in Portugal, they're still family-owned business. So, so very traditional family-owned businesses where succession really is the way that companies are run. Talent doesn't necessarily come from outside. It's groomed from within, especially within the family unit. And so suppliers and everyone that surrounds that family unit really is a very tight-knit network.
Yeah.
And so I've been finding that, really integrating different associations, chambers of commerce, entities that represent the entrepreneurial DNA of the country, where it gives us an ability to network, for people to get to know us one-on-one, in the flesh, I suppose. And that really does have an impact. And of course, that needs to be built alongside your social profile. People need to see that you are, I suppose, building that thought leadership helps you to stand out.
Yeah.
You wanted to make a comment on that?
I want to take a few steps back. Something you said about value selling and relationship selling, because and then bringing in cultural differences. So when I took on the role to lead sales for Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, I can't tell you the number of times that salespeople, so my team overlaid onto much larger sales team within a big tech company. I can't tell you the number of times that the salespeople in that country would tell me that won't work here. That approach won't work here. And I was a huge fan of the challenger sale, right? I was kind of, dipped into the world of challenger back in 2010 as a sales rep, and then continued my schooling of challenger into being a sales leader. And it kind of made up everything that I did in terms of our sales approach, quantifying value, challenging customers. Our talent acquisition program had challenger built in. And I'd often speak to salespeople in countries like Saudi Arabia, for example. No, challenger won't work here. You cannot build constructive tension with people in Saudi Arabia. And I would try really hard to help them understand that, well, you say it doesn't work here, but at the end of the day, at its core, challenger is about building value-based relationships. So you just need to find where the boundary is, right? Then you bring, and you talk about value selling. I think our personal brands are a key part of value selling, because it starts with our personality. Your buyer is going to make a decision instantly about whether they like you or not. And if they don't like you, it's going to be very difficult for them to build trust and then believe what you say from a value perspective. And so, I think today, when we think about the research that Challenger did years ago, 53% of a purchase decision is influenced by the experience that the buyer receives. I think that's probably a lot more today. And if the buyer doesn't feel like they like you or can trust you, then they're just not going to speak to you. It's so easy just to ignore salespeople today.
There are so many different ways. When I speak about value selling, I do mean it in a very broad way.
Yeah.
That, captures challenger, insight selling, solution selling, spin selling, you name it. I really do feel that nowadays, the best thing that we can do is really learn and have an open mind about the different methodologies out there, and then really try and integrate and incorporate what makes sense to our sales cycle, the product that we sell, and so on.
Yeah.
But it's funny because when I think about, I worked with so many different people, with so many different personalities, from people who are very, 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 very shy and introvert, to the kind of the loudest, most extrovert person in the rooms. And what I find is, like you say, if within yourself, knowing what you're good at and what your weaknesses are, if you within yourself can find that balance between always being genuine and authentic, and focusing on the value that you can provide and deliver to your prospect or your client at every single interaction with them, understanding that nowadays we really need to adapt and understand that how it is that we buy, that we sell, that is aligned to the way our customers buy.
Yeah.
Right? I think now we start to delve into the secret, into what makes companies today successful at selling. And I really do think that adaptability has always been a key word for us. It's always been key for us to our success, but it's never been more true now, because pivoting can be very tricky, can be a very tricky thing to do.
Yeah. And it it baffles me how, when you say about being buyer centric, it's one thing having a sales process and the messaging that you deem to be buyer centric. It's a very different thing when you're trying to engage with multiple stakeholders influencing that purchase decision and tailoring the content, the messaging for them. For the most part, salespeople don't get the luxury of engaging with all of those stakeholders because they're shielded from them. Yet they're all accessible to salespeople if they choose to find them on social media and subliminally tailor their content to their decision-making unit as a whole. And there's so many salespeople I think are missing a trick when it comes to that. They say, "Oh, social selling, that's a load of horse crap." Actually, let's take away the negative connotation from social selling. Let's think about what you're trying to do. You're trying to amplify your personal brand in front of the stakeholders that you want to do business with, that you want to build influence with. So why not do that on a daily?
Yeah, I've got to say, it surprises me if anyone today doesn't understand the value of social selling. What I find from my experience is that most people are actually scared of it, because they really don't know how to leverage it. And also we must remember, and I feel this in my own skin as well. I mean, I find myself, as I'm understanding and learning how it is that I can, grow my brand, my personal brand, socially speaking, that it many a times it takes me out of my comfort zone. I don't actually really do enjoy seeing myself on video, but I really don't.
Great, by the way.
Oh, this is the thing. But I just have to get over myself, right? I just have to get over myself, dust myself off, and just whatever demons are going on in my head, I just have to forget them and just dust myself off and go and do it anyway. Right? But it's not a step. I work with quite a few executives, and it is a difficult step for many to take. You do have to work. And I speak a lot about this, right? you need to work at social soft skills, right? In order to really leverage that side of your personality, of that self-confidence.
Yeah.
That helps you to communicate. And you just have to understand that it's a process. So you're not going to get it right. I often see women and men, hosts, presenters, who just look impeccable. Yes, yes, Alex. Yes. I just think, oh my God, I mean, I look dreadful next to that. And then I just think, probably they wake up, they spend 20 hours a day, practicing their smile, or, manicuring every single inch of their body and rehearsing. And I just don't have time for that. So
at the end of the day, people that like you will like you. People that don't like you won't like you.
Right.
And the less we worry about that, the better. I think social selling for me, and I know we're coming to time shortly, but it's just like going to the gym. You don't see results instantly. You might get a little bit lucky along the way, but you don't see results instantly. The same way as nutrition, right? I'm a huge fan of nutrition right now. In fact, I've started a supplement business, but that's a separate conversation, because I honestly feel that by fueling our body with the raw nutrients that we need to run optimally, that will improve our sales performance.
Indeed.
Again, that takes time. There's no quick fixes.
Indeed. And so can I just plug in, Jackie, thank you so much for, stepping in with your comments. You're being your authentic self. I love it. I hope it shows. We love our guests' company. We love the valuepreneurs and the sales shakers that come join us every week. Any final thoughts? So I would love to come back and have this conversation with you a year from now.
Okay.
Because if we can do that, because then, you will have had time to adjust to actually trying to get things done in Portugal, right? Because there's that, you need to live, your family needs to live, you need to kind of get things off the ground, whether it's papers, documents, car, driving license, all those logistics.
Yeah.
But as you start to really mine into your territory and step into a new kind of acceleration and rhythm of prospecting and client nurturing from Portugal, it would be really lovely to understand how that goes. Now, also to say that I find that there's different demographic aspects about the country itself. Portugal is a place where, for example, there's a lot of startups moving here. There's a lot of digital nomads finding a great place to work and co-work here in Portugal. There's a lot of incubators and accelerators supporting startups and businesses here. Do you want to just kind of call upon this topic of startups at all?
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, you might have a bit more color to add here, because, for me, I was living in the UK. My business is a UK business. We've traveled here on a D7 visa, which is a passive income visa. And we continue to run the business in the UK. So it was relatively easy for us to move here and retain our UK company. I've not yet looked into setting up a company in Portugal, but I would like to talk to you some more about what that would entail. It's relatively easy to do in the UK. I don't know how easy it would be to do in Portugal and what the benefits of me doing so would be, but I'd love to look into that with you.
Yeah, very, very easy to set up a company in Portugal. In fact, there's a service that does it in an hour.
Okay.
60 minutes.
Okay.
So very, very easy. What we're also finding is that, there's a lot of European funds that are traveling across the different member states. And of course, Portugal is very much using these funds to accelerate different parts of the economy. Of course, This is an economy that's still heavily relying on tourism and hotel. Hotels and the tourism industry it weighs heavily on the contribution to GDP here. But overall, there's a real sense of excitement around business, and not just retail. I really do start to see a big emergence of B2B here. So you are all invited to come visit us. I'm closer to Lisbon. Alex, you are? Whereabouts?
I'm down in Lolle in the Algarve.
Lolle in the Algarve. Next time we're going to bring our sombreros for you guys. Come join us next time. We love talking with you.
Yeah.
Come see us anytime. Join us at Sales TV, and we'll catch you soon. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Cheerio for now. Thank you, Alex. Obrigada.
My pleasure. Obrigada.